So there's a popular idea out there that listening to your intuition is somehow just about listening to your gut or following your gut or trusting your gut. And I'd really like to clarify or correct some important details that are really being overlooked here. And then give you guys some ways of like accessing the intuition that you really want when you're talking about this, because it's not the information in your gut. So we're going to look at types of intuition, and then we're going to go over blocks to receiving your higher forms of intuition. So first off, receiving information intuitively is a mode of energetic perception. So we're able to receive information through several energetic networks that connect us with the wider world. Now, sense perception is obviously the most well known of these, but we do have other energetic pathways. Now, many people, of course, have heard about the seven chakras, but in some traditions, we actually acknowledge up to 144 different energetic centers through which the individual human body can connect with the outside world. And so, energetic information can come in from any of these channels, and then our own particular body, our own particular individuated energetic field has its own way of translating that information. So just like our eyes translate electromagnetic waves into specific colors, and just as our auditory network translates these waves into very specific shapes of sound repeated over time, we come to place identifications on these shapes of sounds, these different differential vibrations, and then they become perceptions of distance or perceptions of space, and eventually perceptions of words. So when we talk about intuition, it's really important to know that you can receive intuitive guidance through many aspects or translations. For example, it can come in as a physical sensation in specific parts of your body. It can come in really straightforwardly as seeing a very specific image, or it might come in as a fully developed idea along with plans for achieving that. And then last, which is where I'd put these so-called feelings of your gut, it might come in as a really fast and distinct form of your body just saying no. And so this can appear as like a kind of generalized feeling of like resistance or disgust. For example, all of a sudden feeling that you don't want to enter a specific building, or maybe you want to like park in a different place, or you're in a group of people and somehow you immediately like you just begin sensing that your energetic field is really contracting around a specific person, and so you want to listen to that. And for me, I get a lot of this type of information when I'm traveling. So if it's on like a busy lane, a busy highway, and I'm seeing something about one of the cars beside me, or sitting in an airport, or on a subway, that seems to be when I get a lot of that type of information. And I think that for a lot of this latter group, I find it's really more of like a lower chakra type of perception. And these are pieces of information designed to keep us safe. And sometimes there may be other layers which come in with that as well. So we might also receive a specific image about someone in the lane beside us. But all of these types of intuition, I find, tend to say things like, avoid this, move away from here, don't trust that person. So it's all about like moving away, what you should move away from. Whereas the intuition that we really care about, or usually care about when we talk about this, is the higher forms of guidance, where maybe this comes in as creative inspiration, or this is basically just all the information about what we should follow and what we should trust, what pathway we should take. And this comes in as a kind of feeling of attraction or like being pulled in a certain direction. And so there's different levels of intuition, and some of this information is directing us away from certain experiences, and some of the information is coming to show us or to pull us towards certain people and experiences. So now here's where we start getting really nuanced and modern with this, because these so-called lower networks of energy are actually linked with the so-called lower brain areas. So this is the brainstem, it's the spinal cord, it's the amygdala. These are all the early evolutionary areas which developed in the evolution of nervous systems. And so that's what we have on the one hand, and of course, these are, for that reason, more hardwired into us. This is our survival programming. When we talk about the lizard brain, this is this whole network, and it's very hardwired into us. But on the other hand, we have the most recent so-called higher brain areas, which, as you know, these are the surface most layers of the prefrontal cortex. They took the longest to develop evolutionarily, and these higher level circuits are, for that reason, they're naturally more refined. They're capable of handling greater degrees of distinctions and nuance, which is another way of talking about perceiving subtlety. And so you can see where I'm going with this, which is that the more subtle forms of vibration, or being able to perceive energetic difference, this is easier to disturb than those lower level, lower brain networks of perception, which are hardwired. And so these higher levels and these higher networks they often stay blocked or inaccessible because of all the other stuff that we have going on in our energetic bodies. So another way to say this is that the lower energetic networks are really loud, and the more refined and subtle ones are quiet. Now, think about this. It's really interesting, right? This is why writers really crave solitude and silence a lot of the time for working, or at least some degree of like consistent control over our environment. So maybe you have like a certain music track that you put on repeat, or you always go to the same table in your favorite cafe. Whereas, just as an example, if you work in construction, it doesn't really make a difference how many sounds there are happening around you. I mean, you probably need ear protection, and this doesn't keep you from doing that work. At this level, like the distraction of a radio in the background probably helps your vibration and like raises you up from like the sheer repetition of physical labor, for example. So the point is that to access more subtle forms of information, you need to think of yourself kind of as a body of water. I really find this metaphor super useful. And what you want to do is return to a state of stillness and clarity so that you can actually see through the water, so that this water can actually register these more subtle forms of distinction. And so you have to wait for like the disturbances to be settled or to clear out, and then you can finally like see through this and again receive these more subtle forms of information. So what kinds of disturbances are we usually talking about here? We're usually dealing with perhaps a lot of sensory disturbances, and these are the easiest ones to deal with. But very often these are heavy emotional forms of emotional baggage, though, like really like deep and tangled energetic systems that really they come from like past and current forms of trauma or any form of like heavy stress that we're not able to deal with. And then there's also a fair degree of mental disturbances, which are things like the judgments that we're still holding on to and the limiting beliefs. And so when we talk about doing the inner work or accessing our higher self or stepping into alignment, we're talking about clearing out all of these distortions and disturbances that keep us from literal clear insight. So this clear insight will happen naturally when all parts of yourself are in communication and synchronized. And then once you have that and you begin taking action on this internal sight, it's really like increasing the angular momentum in your energetic system, and you're going to accelerate the clarification process and you will receive greater insight. So the densest emotional blocks here are your tangled networks of, I find these can really be distilled into the networks of fear, anger, and shame. So these are, these are the most potent ones. If you can clear these to any degree, like you're going to gain back a lot of your energy. So, and if you really want to turbocharge this work, though, I would just jump right into the work of working on your shame networks, clearing these networks, Shame works at the deepest level, and then it's going to condition all the other blockages as well. So I did make a video on how to work with shame and how to work at that level, so you can check that out. It's really like one of the most direct ways to like bring back a lot of your own sense of self-empowerment. And so also though, like working through fear on the other hand is kind of like working at the other end of this tunnel, so to speak, because by taking direct forms of action that acknowledge the inner knowing that we already possess and moving through our own limiting beliefs and fears in that direction is also just another super powerful way to like gain back a lot of that energy and like create immediate new openings for new insights. And so that's really a quick map of what it means to follow and access your intuition. And so I hope you can see like how much more involved this already is than the simplistic image of just trusting your gut. Part of the problem there too is that that's where like so many of our trauma-based distortions live, and so they will work as like filters and conditions on any information that you're getting. So instinctual responses, for example, are not necessarily like accurate registers of information. So anyway, let me know if this has clarified anything for you, if it helps, or if it just raises new questions, and then I'll address some of these. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the comments.